The Galactic Empire mocked one old human, but he just declared war and now the entire galaxy fears him. The Galactic Empire's capital world was vast and bright with towers of crystal and steel that touched the skies and ships that flew between them like birds in a great storm, and at the very center of it all was the Grand Council chamber where the most powerful leaders of the galaxy met to decide the fate of entire worlds, and it was there that the sound of alien voices rose in a wave of laughter and scorn as an old human named William Carter stood silently in their presence. He was dressed in a simple black suit and carried no guards, no servants, no ornaments of power, just his frail frame and his sharp gray eyes. The chamber was alive with color and movement. Alien diplomats with glowing scales, wings, tendrils, and armored hides filled the seats around him, each species proud of its role in the empire, each one looking at the old man with either mockery or pity. The vast ceiling above them displayed shifting holograms of past victories of empires crushed and rebellions, silenced as if the chamber itself laughed along with them. The laughter was loud because they saw only weakness in him. They saw trembling hands and a bent back. They saw white hair and lines carved deep into his skin. They thought time had already claimed him, and that humanity was a dying race clinging to its pride in a corner of the galaxy they had never respected. Earth, they had tolerated humans only because they were useful, but now even that tolerance was gone and the Council was ready to strip humanity of its rights and lands. And they believed the old man before them would bow and beg, but William did not bow. He simply stood in silence and let them mock. His silence burned more than words could, for he was once a decorated commander who had walked through fire and storms of war, while most of those in the chamber had never faced death on the battlefield. He had seen comrades fall beside him. He had heard the scream of metal, and the silence of space after battle. He had lived longer than many empires believed a human could, and though his body carried age, his spirit carried iron. The laughter swelled when a counselor from the reptilian Vakar species rose from his seat. The creature's scales glistened under the chamber. Light, his yellow eyes full of contempt, he called humanity a primitive race, fit only to serve others. His voice dripped with arrogance as he mocked Earth, calling its people storytellers clinging to old myths of bravery and strength, while the galaxy had moved beyond them. He said that humans were like children playing with fire too weak to wield true power, and then he raised his claws and declared that Earth should be stripped of its independence, its colonies given to stronger races, and its people bound as servants to the will of the Empire. The chamber exploded in approval. Voices from every corner joined in with laughter and applause. William stood unmoved. He let the storm of insults wash over him. He let them laugh at the cracks in his voice, the tremor in his hands, the age in his bones. He let them believe the lie they wanted to believe, that he was nothing, and that his people were nothing, because he knew the truth was waiting like a knife behind the curtain of their arrogance. He slowly placed his hand on the edge of the podium and lifted his gaze across the room. His eyes met alien eyes from dozens of species, and the chamber began to quiet just enough for his voice to be heard. It was not a loud voice, but it cut through, the noise like a blade slicing silk. He said, "Only this, you will regret this." And for a moment a strange silence followed, but it broke again with laughter, for the Council thought him ridiculous. What threat could an old man pose against an empire of 1,000 worlds? But William did not laugh. He looked into their eyes one by one, and his steady calm was more frightening than any outburst could be. They did not see the man who had walked battlefields and commanded fleets. They saw only a fragile relic. They could not see the storm that was waiting beyond their reach, not yet. And as they dismissed him with mockery, William Carter turned his back on the chamber and walked away. His steps slow, but steady, and though no alien there knew it, the galaxy had already begun to change the moment he spoke those words, because somewhere in the shadows of space Earth was waiting, and Earth was ready. When William left the council chamber, the echoes of laughter still followed him down the long, shining halls of the Empire's palace, and the alien guards who lined the way looked at him with smirks of amusement. Some even whispered to one another about how fragile he looked, like a man who could fall at any step. The air of the palace was cold and filled with the pride of 1,000 victories carved into its walls, battles won against entire civilizations. Banners of conquered races fluttered, in the artificial breeze, and William walked past them all with the calm of a man who had seen too many banners raised and too many banners burned. He did not quicken his steps, nor did he bow his head. He walked as if he carried the weight of centuries on his shoulders. Yet it was not a burden. It was a fire hidden deep inside his heart. News of the meeting spread quickly through the capital world. Alien merchants laughed in their markets and spoke of humans as fools. Diplomats shared drinks in glittering halls, mocking the fragile Earth envoy who had dared to speak with pride. Some said it was only a matter of days before Earth would be annexed, and its colonies divided like spoils of war. They spoke of human ships as rusting relics of an older time, and of human soldiers as farmers playing at war. It became a kind of joke across the city to imitate the old man's words. "You will regret this." They repeated it with sneers, never knowing how close those words were to the truth. William, however, did not waste his time with anger. He had carried the weight of insults before, and he knew words were nothing without action. He returned to the embassy where a small group of humans waited anxiously, young aides, soldiers, and diplomats who looked at him with worry. One of them, a young woman named Claire Adams, whose sharp eyes carried the mind of an engineer, asked quietly, "Did they listen to you?" And William only shook his head and gave her a small, tired smile. They listened long enough to laugh, Claire, but that is all they were willing to do. John Miller, another of his old allies who now served as Earth's strategist, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. He was younger than William, but still gray at the temples, and he asked what now, and William looked at him with that same calm fire and said, "Now we show them." That night, as the city above glowed with endless lights, William met with John and Claire in secret. The embassy had tunnels hidden since the earliest days of human contact, tunnels designed to escape if ever Earth's people became targets. Those tunnels led to places the Empire's eyes never bothered to look, and within them lay a hidden transmitter shielded from detection. For decades, William stood before it, his hand hovering over the switch. John and Claire waited for his word, and William spoke in a low, steady tone. "They have mocked us. They have threatened to take our home, our children, our freedom. But they have made one mistake. They think age means weakness. They think patience means surrender. They think we are small because we are silent, and tonight we remind them who we are." With a firm press of his hand, he activated the transmitter, and a signal cut through the void of space far beyond the capital. It reached stations buried under the crust of Mars and colonies hidden in the shadows of Saturn's rings. It reached bases carved into asteroids and oceans, where submarines the size of cities slept unseen. It reached the dark silence beyond Neptune, where fleets lay hidden in shadows. Humanity had built its future in secret, always knowing the day would come when arrogance would force them to defend their home. And when the signal came, the silence ended across the solar system. Hidden hangars opened, vast ships stirred awake, weapons that had never been seen by alien eyes began to hum with life. Humanity had been preparing for decades under the nose of the Empire, back on the capital world. William stood tall in the small chamber. As the signal continued to spread, his allies looked at him with awe. John gave a rare smile, one filled with both pride and grim understanding. Claire whispered softly, "They have no idea what is coming." And William Carter placed both hands on the table before him, steady as stone, and replied, "No, they do not, but soon they will. Because tomorrow the Empire will believe they face a weak old man today, but tomorrow they will learn what humanity does when it is mocked and threatened. Tomorrow they will understand that Earth is no one's servant." The night outside was filled with lights of alien celebrations. The Empire's counselors toasted each other for their cleverness, thinking that Earth was already theirs to control. But in the hidden silence of space far beyond their reach, an entire species was waking from patience into fury. And the old man they mocked was no longer a quiet envoy. He was once again a commander, and he had just declared the beginning of humanity's answer. Back on Earth, the air was heavy with tension, but also with a spark that had not burned so brightly in decades. The message William had sent from the Empire's capital spread like a silent fire across the hidden networks of humanity, and one by one old bases that had been thought abandoned lit up again deep under the Atlantic Ocean. Huge steel doors that had been closed for half a century slowly opened, revealing hangars filled with ships that had never been shown to outsiders in the eye. Deserts of Nevada, vast underground bunkers came alive as lights flickered on, and crews hurried into positions on the frozen plains of Antarctica. Scientists and soldiers emerged from hidden facilities carrying equipment that the rest of the galaxy would not have believed humans capable of building, and above it all in orbit around the moon. Vast stations that had always appeared to be little more than communication hubs revealed their true purpose when armor plates slid open to show cannons, long kept in silence waiting for the order to speak. William returned to his homeland not as a broken man, but as one carrying the weight of leadership once again. When his shuttle landed at a secure base hidden deep in the Rocky Mountains, hundreds of men and women stood waiting for him. Some were soldiers with the marks of long service in their eyes. Some were engineers and scientists who had given their lives to secret work without recognition. All of them stood in silence as the old man stepped out and raised his head toward them. They saw not just an elder but the commander they had once followed into impossible battles. And though his hair had turned white, his voice was still the same steady voice they remembered he told them. The Empire laughed today. They believe we are weak. They believe Earth will kneel. But we will never kneel. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever among those who came to his side. First was John Miller, who had returned from the capital world with him. John had been William's strategist in wars long past, and though he was younger than William, the years had given him a face marked with calm and scars of experience. He spoke quietly to William in the command chamber, where maps of the solar system glowed on vast holographic displays. Their fleets are larger than ours in number. Their supply chains run across the stars. Their technology is not primitive, William, but it is not prepared for us. And William nodded slowly, his hand resting on the edge of the table. Then we strike where they think we cannot. We fight them in the shadows until the shadows belong to us. Claire Adams arrived moments later, her hands and face smeared with grease from the hangar where she had been working. She was younger than both men, but she had carried the burden of Earth's secret weapons for years. Her mind was sharp, her inventions dangerous. She had spent her life building tools not for conquest, but for survival. Her voice was filled with energy as she placed a device on the table before them. It was small, no larger than a human head, but inside it was power enough to cut through an entire fleet of warships, cloaked drive inhibitors. She explained, their sensors will never see us coming. Our ships will vanish from their maps until it is too late. William studied the device with quiet pride. Then he looked at her and said, "You have given us what patience has bought Claire now. It is time to use it, across Earth." The awakening continued hidden. Academies released young pilots who had been trained in secret for a war. No one outside Earth had expected men and women who had grown up listening to their parents whisper about the dangers of the Empire, now strapped into ships designed for speed and power. Hidden shipyards in orbit around Mars released vessels camouflaged to look like harmless freighters. But inside their hulls were weapons designed to split battleships apart. Colonies on Saturn's moons, where families had lived, under the guise of research stations, began arming themselves, revealing bunkers filled with supplies and fighters. Even the mining stations in the asteroid belt revealed their true faces as fortresses waiting to be called upon. The Empire still laughed. In their palaces across the stars, they believed Earth had no strength to resist. They mocked the old man's warning. They told themselves that human technology was centuries behind, and that the first wave of their fleets would crush Earth in days. They could not see the truth because arrogance blinded them. They did not know that every insult, every act of control, every whisper of disdain had been fuel for Earth's fire. They did not know that William Carter had spent decades preparing for this day, and that even in his old age his mind was sharper than most commanders half his years. One evening, William walked through one of the underground hangars of the Rocky Mountain base. The floor rumbled as ships rolled past, massive ships with sleek black hulls and glowing engines, each of them designed for war, yet painted with the simple emblem of Earth, a blue circle with a single white star in the center. Young soldiers saluted as he walked by, some of them barely more than children. In his eyes, yet they looked at him with faith as if he carried all of humanity in his hands. He paused before them and spoke in a low voice that carried across the hangar. "I am not young anymore, but I am here with you, and I will not send you anywhere. I would not go myself. The Empire thinks it has frightened us, but it has only awakened us. You are the blade they will never see coming. and together we will show them that Earth was never weak. And in that moment, among the roar of engines and the glow of lights, William Carter no longer looked like the old envoy mocked in the council chamber. He looked like what he had always been, the commander of humanity's will, and the first sparks of war were already burning brighter than the Empire could imagine. The Empire believed its fleets were unstoppable. They had spent centuries crushing rebellions and silencing uprisings. Their ships were vast, their armies endless, their arrogance absolute. When the order came to prepare for war against Earth, the counselors treated it like a formality. Fleets gathered at staging points near the edge of human space, and alien admirals boasted that the campaign would be swift. Some predicted 3 days until Earth surrendered, others gave it a week at most. The galaxy laughed with them. They broadcast speeches of victory before the first shot was even fired, and they played William Carter's words on public screens as a joke. Entire taverns in alien cities roared with laughter, imitating his steady voice. "You will regret this." They had no idea that regret was closer than they thought on Earth. William stood in a chamber filled with commanders, scientists, engineers, and soldiers. A broadcast system had been prepared, one that would reach not just the Empire but every world under its rule. When the cameras lit up, William appeared across the stars, his figure calm and straight against the backdrop of the Earth flag behind him. The old man who had been mocked days ago now looked like something different, his eyes sharp, his voice steady and unbroken. He spoke slowly, but every word struck like iron to the leaders of the Empire, to the council that laughed. "Hear me, you have called us weak. You have threatened our children, and you have sought to break us, but know this: Earth does not bow and humanity does not kneel. We are not your servants, we are not your slaves from this day forward. Humanity is at war with the Empire." The words spread faster than fire. Alien marketplaces fell silent. Taverns where laughter had filled the air went still. Entire star systems stopped to listen. An old man had just declared war on the greatest power the galaxy had ever known. Many thought it madness. Many thought it was a bluff. But for the first time in centuries, fear crept into the bones of those who served the Empire. The image of William Carter did not show weakness. It showed resolve, a resolve that many oppressed worlds recognized instantly, and whispers began to rise: if humans could defy the Empire, maybe others could too. Inside the war rooms of the Empire, admirals roared with anger. Their scaled fists and clawed hands slammed against tables, calling the broadcast an insult to the authority of the council. Orders were given to accelerate the invasion. Fleets would leave within days. Thousands of ships loaded with soldiers and weapons prepared to crush Earth in one decisive strike. Commanders sneered as they studied maps of the solar system, mocking the simplicity of human colonies. They expected nothing more than a token resistance that would be erased before the galaxy's eyes. They even prepared to broadcast the invasion live as a warning to other species. "This is what happens to those who resist," they said. "This is what happens to those who dare defy the Empire." But while the Empire prepared to show the galaxy its strength, William Carter and his people prepared to show the galaxy its weakness. Hidden fleets stirred awake across the solar system. Vast black ships powered by engines the Empire had never seen before moved into silent positions near asteroid fields and icy moons. Weapons that had been kept secret for decades charged quietly under the cover of cloaking fields. Claire Adams worked tirelessly, with her teams checking every device, every shield, every cannon. Her inventions were dangerous and untested on this scale, but she carried the fire of certainty in her eyes. John Miller studied the enemy fleet movements with cold patience, laying out traps with the mind of a predator waiting for prey. Every order from William was calm and measured. There was no rush, only certainty. They had waited for decades. They could wait a few days more. On the night before the Empire's fleets were set to move, William stood alone in the command deck of Earth's primary station. The stars outside glittered cold and distant. He placed his hands behind his back and stared at the darkness. He remembered the laughter in the council, the sneers, the smirks, the arrogance of those who believed humanity had already fallen. He thought of every insult, every humiliation humanity had suffered in silence, and he let it harden into steel within him when Claire approached and asked quietly, "Do you think they are ready?" He did not turn his gaze from the stars. He simply said, "They are ready enough. They may outnumber us, but they do not outlast us." and tomorrow they will learn what patience buys. When the first wave of Imperial fleets jumped into the edges of the solar system, alien admirals laughed on their bridges, already preparing speeches of victory. But what they did not know was that the moment William's broadcast had ended, humanity had already chosen the battlefield. Earth would not meet them in desperation, Earth would meet them in fury. And for the first time in living memory, the Empire was about to discover what it meant to fight a people who refused to kneel. William Carter stood in the command room of the Iron Resolve, and the glow of the stars washed over his tired face as the great warship moved through the silent sea of space. The crew looked at him, waiting for orders, but also for something more. They waited for a sign that the man who had carried them this far still had the strength to lead. Carter kept his voice steady, even though inside his chest, his heart beat like a drum. He knew the battle had reached the point where hesitation could cost everything, and he knew the Empire had never been so close to breaking. The old man who once was mocked as weak now stood as the shadow that haunted the Galactic Empire. The reports came in. Enemy fleets were gathering in numbers greater than ever before. New reinforcements had arrived from distant sectors. The Empire was desperate and cornered, and a cornered beast was always dangerous. Carter told the crew that fear was natural, but defeat was not acceptable. He reminded them that humans were born on a death world where every day was a fight to survive, and no empire could break a people shaped by such a world. His words carried across the ship and steadied hearts when his second-in-command, Ethan, raised concern about the fuel reserves. Carter simply said, "We will take what we need after we win, because victory is the only path forward." His calm words made the crew believe even when doubt pressed against them like a weight. On the Empire's side, a council of admirals and generals gathered, their voices sharp with anger and fear. They could not understand how a single human and a handful of ships had shattered their fleets. Again and again they shouted about the dishonor of losing to what they still called a primitive race. They swore Carter's name as if it was a curse and promised to erase him from the stars. But their plans were slow and their pride blinded them. They prepared a trap, a massive false signal of weakness, sent into space, a bait to lure Carter into the jaws of destruction. Carter studied the signal with his tired eyes, and though it looked convincing, he felt something was wrong. His years of living and his scars of experience whispered that no empire showed weakness so loudly unless they wanted someone to see it instead of ignoring it. He decided to walk into it, but on his terms. He told Ethan to ready the Iron Resolve and the fleet not to charge blindly, but to stalk like wolves around prey. They would let the Empire believe they were taking the bait and then strike when the trap was halfway closed. The journey into the Empire's false battleground was slow and heavy with tension. The crew spoke in hushed tones. The lights dimmed across the ship to battle readiness. Every step echoed the thought that they might not return. Carter walked through the deck, speaking to soldiers, engineers, and medics. He looked each one in the eye and told them they carried not just weapons but the hope of Earth. The old man's presence filled the crew with a fire stronger than fear. When the ships entered the sector, the trap was sprung. Fleets of the Empire emerged from behind asteroids and from cloaked stations like shadows. With teeth, the stars lit with the fire of 100 warships, ready to swallow the humans whole. The crew gasped, but Carter only nodded as if he had expected it all along. He ordered the fleet to hold steady and then to unleash hidden reserves of power. The Iron Resolve had carried secret upgrades built in. Silence over months with the help of allied engineers. Carter gave the order, and the ship's weapons roared with force unseen before. Beams cut through enemy lines and missiles twisted with guidance so sharp that entire formations of Empire ships collapsed into flames before they could adjust. But the Empire was vast and stubborn. They pressed harder. Waves of ships poured forward. Carter gave calm orders every second, his voice steady, guiding the chaos like a captain steering a ship through a storm. He used every mistake the enemy made, every blind spot, every hesitation. The battle was long, the kind of long that made every breath feel heavy, the kind of long that made soldiers believe time itself was bending. But Carter never allowed panic to grow. When Ethan shouted that their shields were near breaking, Carter simply replied, "Then we will fight with bare steel if we must." And those words echoed through the ship like thunder, reminding them that humanity had never needed protection to survive, only courage. Hours later, the Empire's trap was broken. Their fleet scattered, their proud generals humiliated. Carter stood at the bridge, his body weary, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion, but his spirit unbroken. He told the crew that this was not the end, that the Empire would bleed more before it fell, and that they must endure like the mountains of earth that outlast storms and wars. His words turned the silence of tired soldiers into nods of resolve. But as the crew prepared for the next move, Carter felt the weight heavier than ever. He knew the final confrontation was drawing near, and that it would not only decide the fate of his people, but also the fate of the Empire itself. Outside, the stars burned bright and silent, as if waiting for history to be written. Inside, one old human gathered his strength once again, knowing that the galaxy still mocked him, but also feared him, and soon would learn why a Death Worlder never forgets an insult, and never stops until justice is done. The iron resolve floated silent above the scarred edges of Empire space, and the crew stared out at the burning trails left behind from the last battle. The smell of smoke and melted steel still clung to their uniforms, and the weight of endless hours of war pressed against their bodies, but none of them spoke of rest because all of them knew the final step was ahead. William Carter stood at the center of the bridge, his hands behind his back, his eyes sharp as if age no longer mattered. He knew the Empire was beaten in pieces but not yet broken. They still clung to their throne world, the great capital at the heart of their dominion, and as long as it stood, the Empire would believe it had power. Carter looked at the star maps and gave a single command: we go to the capital and finish what we started. The crew answered with steady voices because after so much fire and blood, there was no turning back. The Empire gathered its last strength around its capital, fleets bigger than any Carter had ever faced, walls of warships armed with weapons from the deepest vaults of their history. Every admiral, every general who still had honor took position to defend their throne. And on the world below, the Emperor himself swore to the council that the human would die and his people would be erased. They played his speeches across every channel, promising that the Empire would show no mercy. But in their voices there was fear hidden behind pride, for they had seen too many defeats, and the shadow of one old human haunted every corner of their thoughts. Carter studied their defenses quietly. He knew the battle ahead might consume him, but he also knew that if he turned away, humanity would always live under the threat of Empire chains, so he ordered his fleet to move forward slow and steady like hunters stalking prey. The first clash came like thunder. The Empire's fleets unleashed fire so heavy the darkness of space lit like day missiles tore across the void. Beams of energy slashed in blinding arcs. The iron resolve shook under the impact. Alarms screamed across its decks, but Carter never flinched. His voice cut through the storm with orders sharp and clear. His ships darted into gaps. His crews fought with the stubbornness of Deathworlders who refused to bow. For hours the battle raged. The galaxy itself seemed to tremble under the weight of fire and steel. But still the humans pressed forward, step by bloody step, breaking lines that were said to be unbreakable. The Empire began to falter, their proud fleets crumbling under the relentless storm, and Carter's name spread like fire among both enemies and allies, whispered like a legend being born before their eyes. At last the iron resolve broke through. The last wall of warships in the capital world lay exposed before them, the glittering jewel of the Empire shining blue and gold beneath the light of its twin suns. Carter stared at it through the viewport, his face pale but firm. He knew this was the moment, the one that would decide everything. He opened a channel to the Emperor. His voice carried across the Empire, plain and steady. You mocked me because of my age. You mocked my people because of our world. You thought Deathworlders were weak and broken. But today you will see that humanity never forgets and never forgives. The Emperor's voice came back full of rage. You are nothing but a frail old man who should have died long ago. Carter answered with words that froze even his own. Crew, maybe I am old, maybe I should have died, but I lived long enough to see the Empire fall. With that he gave the order. The iron resolve and the fleet unleashed every weapon. Every last reserve missile streaked down toward the planet stations, exploded in fire. Defensive grids shattered one by one. The capital itself trembled. The Empire fought back with desperation, but their power cracked under the storm. The sky of their great world lit with burning trails. The Emperor's palace shook under impacts. Carter stood silent, watching as centuries of arrogance collapsed in flames. When the palace fell, the Empire's fleet surrendered across the stars. Their soldiers dropped their weapons. Their generals went silent. The war was over. The Mocking voices of the Empire were gone, replaced by the echo of fear and respect. The bridge of the Iron Resolve was quiet when the last reports came in. Carter leaned against the console, his body trembling with exhaustion but his eyes still sharp. He looked at his crew and spoke softly. "This is not victory for me, it is victory for humanity, for every insult, every chain, every drop of blood we were forced to spill. Let this day remind the galaxy that humans will never kneel." He paused, then added, "If anyone still wishes to test us, remember the Empire mocked an old man and now the Empire is no more." His words sank into the silence and then into history. Carter walked slowly out of the command room, leaving behind the glow of broken stars. The war was over and the galaxy would never forget his name. The man who had once been mocked had carried humanity into legend. The Death Worlder who declared war and ended an empire.